Mrs. Coleman, lend money, Mr. Coleman unexpectedly asked, when you just came home. A woman just raised her eyebrows. Once husband asked for money means, from their monthly budget, he did not want to take. Why do you need money? She asked. Leo asked for a loan from his Lena. Birthday in 2 days. I want to buy a gift. Mrs. Coleman was even more surprised. What side am I here? Mr. Coleman, not understanding, looked at his wife. But how what? You, my wife, I would give him, but the other day I took a new prefix, spent all the stash, as he urgently needs. Have you been saving money for a new phone? Here and extended, still not enough, and he will give back soon. Mr. Coleman and Mrs. Coleman have been married for 4 years. They met when she got a job at his firm. More precisely, she didn't belong to him, he also worked there. Word for the word, and made friends, and then moved on to another level. By a year he proposed to her. They both made good money, but the family budget was more in half than joint. Chipped in for general expenses, and spend the rest of the money as you see fit. At first put together the down payment on the mortgage. When did you get the apartment? Little by little, collected for the summer holiday. Mortgage costs increased slightly, but not critical, so two had free money. Leo has been Mr. Coleman's best friend since childhood, but he was quite a strange guy, according to Mrs. Coleman, did not stay long at any job, constantly twisted his nose. This I don't like. There and I won't go. Here I am not comfortable. For the last year, he was allegedly sitting on maternity leave with his 4-year-old son, who should have been in kindergarten a long time ago. His wife Lena was engaged in all sorts of women's wisdom, eyelash extensions, cut hair at home, dyed hair and eyebrows. I also did my hair for the holidays. In this respect she was very clever, and she always had enough clients. All in all, a strange family. But at least, so it seemed to Mrs. Coleman. Mr. Coleman, you excuse me, but yours left. I won't lend money anymore. I do not even ask. I do not advise you. Mr. Coleman was already surprised. Like I used to communicate well, and here's to you. What did he not like about you? Asked the husband. But to begin with, we have already lent him more than once. Gives back he is very long, but before he somehow worked, and now she works part-time as a nanny for her own son. What will he give? How from what? Now will be sent to kindergarten, and he gets a job, almost naive, said Mr. Coleman, believing that these are only temporary difficulties for his friend. And when will it be? I actually plan to take the phone in 2 weeks. How do I get my salary? But it's okay, take a little later, suggested hubby. You seriously? He means will buy a gift for his wife with his finger about finger without hitting. I still have my money, must wait. No, I'm not satisfied, then. Mr. Coleman has already changed his clothes. He was tired of shouting over the wall. He entered the living room and looked sternly at the rebellious wife. Mrs. Coleman, well, what are you doing harm? I'm telling you, he will give back soon. Mr. Coleman, topic closed. Do you remember, we loaned him $800 3 years ago from a mortgage. To him not enough for the car. Promised release in 2 weeks, and returned 6 months later. And I almost had to beg for our money back. Well, I returned it, which claims means did not work before. Son, I repeat to you again, if he wants to buy Lena a gift, let it go and work. I'm not going to give my stash. And how will he earn? He is looking after his son's wife works. Not only women can sit on maternity leave. To a kid already 4 years old, it's time for him to go to kindergarten, to socialize. They don't even talk at all. Only that the tablet uses all day. Fine, it's high time to give the nanny to Leo. At all I can get it, where is Lena looking? Oops, what are you starting? They'll figure it out without you. How can they live? Once the two of them are fine, then everything is fine. Mrs. Coleman just threw up her hands. She knew that her husband is a little naive in family matters, but didn't think so. Why did you decide that Lena is happy with everything? She asked. But since she still hasn't kicked him out, it means everything is okay. Nothing this does not mean. Just because she is stupid, got married on a whim, and then she also managed to give birth to a second child from such an infantile, where is she alone with 2 children? Here he endures. If not for her parents, they would have glued their flippers a long time ago, Mrs. Coleman insisted. Mr. Coleman was already getting angry, he didn't like, when his wife spoke badly of his friends. Parents then, what about here? What nonsense! Seriously? Do you think that they themselves save money for holidays in Egypt every year? No, Mom and Dad help. When Small was born, so parents to celebrate him immediately bought everything: crib, stroller, chair for babies, clothes for the year ahead. Themselves would they fly into the pipe with such expenses? Not to be surprised, even if they don't know how much it costs. Where do you know all this? This is the first time I hear, Mr. Coleman insisted. How aware? Lena herself told me. And also, that she is not at all shy about asking her parents for help, even when you have enough money. Mole, it is their sacred duty help children, that's what they live for. Sarcasm was in every word she said. Isn't that right? Here Lena is normal, she is not afraid to take a penny from her parents once again. And you gave yours an ultimatum, that they can only give you gifts for your birthday. Bradsome, I not bullshit at all. I just want my parents, at least in their old age, to live a little for themselves. Look, they completed the renovation last year and even managed to relax abroad for the first time. If I sucked all the juice out of them, how is your Lena? So they would also still live in an apartment, which has not been renovated since that time, how the house was commissioned. Stupidity this, but only. Here if my parents were alive, they would definitely help us, Mr. Coleman said offendedly. I wouldn't let them do that. We're doing so well, to further strain the older generation. Let's enjoy life. Mine and so didn't stay long. We are at that age now, when to help parents, and not vice versa. So we and our own children will never have such reasoning. Husband was indignant. It was a sore subject for Mrs. Coleman. She didn't want to go back to it now, although lately all quarrels ended with this. When they bought an apartment, they began to think about the child, but nothing worked. Mrs. Coleman went to the doctor. She said that only echo will help you get pregnant. They already made 2 attempts and failed. The first time had an ectopic pregnancy, although this is a rarity, and the second time the fetus was measured at 9 months. Mrs. Coleman was unsure, ready to go through something like this again, therefore, Mr. Coleman's today's statement was completely off topic. So, Mr. Coleman, let's stop arguing. I tell you again, I will not give money and do not ask. It's time for me to run, I signed up for the salon. Upset, Mrs. Coleman left home. To her it seemed that she made her point enough, but it turned out that Mr. Coleman did not take her words seriously. Mr. Coleman was just going to hockey when the lion ran to him. Brother, so, are you going to lend me money? You are the last hope. Afraid, what if I come without a gift, then my wife will definitely kick me out of the house. Like wood, his friend Lev told him jokingly. All in all, Mrs. Coleman refused to borrow, rested with a horn and that's it. So what won't work? Excuse me. Mr. Coleman, well, what are you we saying friends forever? I promised, what will I give? I am the grave. Said did. Help out, brother. Yes, you know, I spent everything on the prefix. More got new toys. To me now I have to wait for my salary, justified Mr. Coleman. The lion thought a little, and then he asked, you know, where does she hide the money? Let's take it, and in a couple of days we will return everything to the penny. She won't even notice, I'll catch up with someone else, everything will be smooth. Mr. Coleman didn't like the idea, but I didn't want to let my friend down either. It's my wife's birthday, almost a holy day. He agreed, took out his wife's money and stash and gave it to Leo. He knew, what if Mrs. Coleman finds out, then he won't get well, but for some reason I was sure that his friend will not let him down. Mrs. Coleman came home, suspecting nothing. and pinned the porch met by a neighbor who a couple of months ago borrowed some money for the treatment of her daughter and she urgently needed money. Mrs. Coleman couldn't refuse, especially that the amount was small. So here, Alina returned her debt and also thanked her from the bottom of her heart that helped so much. Great. I thought when Mrs. Coleman, I just didn't have enough. Tomorrow, I'm going to buy myself a new smartphone. Looking at the broken screen of his fifth Xiaomi, she presented with anticipation, as he already holds a new model in his hands. Mrs. Coleman came home and the first thing she went to the bedroom to put money to the rest. She had a small box from under the old phone where she kept her money. She opened it and found only emptiness. Mr. Coleman was not at home, but Mrs. Coleman already guessed that he took the money and gave it to Leo. At first she was very angry, but then I tried to calm myself, truth, not very successful. She understood, to make a scandal this is not the best solution, and it still doesn't help the situation. But something had to be done. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. This was the same Lena. Mrs. Coleman, hello. I want you with Mr. Coleman is invited to your birthday party in Sunday at 6 o'clock. Will you come? Hello, of course we'll come, answered Mrs. Coleman, trying to be friendly. Oops, you will not believe, today Levka gave me such a gift. I'm still in shock. Yes, cold? And what did he give you? She asked. Newcomer smartphone. Not even some bushy, but just from the store. I haven't even changed my SIM yet. He ran to the store for champagne to mark the furniture very great. What a good guy you are. Mrs. Coleman said sarcastically, but Lena did not understand this. Cold, run to set the table. Joy is something. Lena hung up, and Mrs. Coleman remained sitting on the couch, stone-faced looking at the broken screen of his phone. Mr. Coleman returned from hockey. He saw that the wife is not in the mood, but did not connect it with the loss of money. By playing with friends, almost forgot about it, that he took Mrs. Coleman's money without her permission. Hello, baby. Why are you pouting your lips? He asked. Yes, no, did not pout. Recently Lena called, invited for a birthday, and told that her husband gave a cool gift. Here see, found the money. She pretended that is not aware of what happened. Mrs. Coleman didn't think of it, what to do, but she really wanted for my husband to finally see who his real friend was. Otherwise he will blindly believe until he shakes himself to the fullest. Well, yes, Mr. Coleman just said, lowering his head. By the way, I met Alina here, our neighbor. She said that the day after tomorrow will pay back, so I can buy a phone early. To me have to wait until payday. In the morning on Sunday, promised to deposit money. So I'm going to the store just before my birthday. Cool saying? She asked with a smile. Very cool, her husband told her a little scared. But in his eyes she understood what he's trying to figure out, how to get her money back. Here and see, how do you get out? Mrs. Coleman thought and went to cook dinner. Mrs. Coleman decided that arguing with her husband is useless, but if you turn on the trick, a little savvy, then you can resolve the conflict quietly and peacefully. She loved her husband, despite its minor shortcomings, although now he went too far with her trust and she knew it very well. Remaining in the evening, Mrs. Coleman was sweet and friendly with her husband, so that he does not suspect anything. They even watched a movie together, and then lay down to sleep in an embrace. When my wife woke up in the morning, it was already the beginning of 11. She hasn't slept in a long time. Usually her husband woke her up around 9 a.m., began to shuffle and rattle in the kitchen, but now he was obviously not at home. Mrs. Coleman took the phone and found an SMS from him. Darling, I have things to do. Will be in the evening, badly. In the evening? How is it in the evening? She guessed that the husband needs to solve a small problem, which his friend helped create. Mr. Coleman called Leo in the morning and said that money is urgently needed so that the wife does not suspect anything. Buddy, we agreed for 2 days. Where can I get them for you right now? But do not worry, let's dock in half an hour and drop by a couple of places. Where can we get help? A lion, not to us about you, but so be it, I will take you. Your wheels are still under repair, so it will be faster. They have been riding for half a day, but never got the money. All who knew Leo already broke off with him more than once, so no one wanted to lend him more. He owed a lot. And what will we do? Mr. Coleman asked irritably when another attempt failed. Crap, brother, I don't even know. Maybe we go to that Lena so that she does not give a debt, then yours will not understand. Dumbest answer. Then Mrs. Coleman will know everything for sure. Can't you borrow from Lena's parents? Suggested by a friend. No, we owe them. For a year now they have been paying for our rented apartment because I don't work. If I also ask for money for a gift, then they will again start dripping Lena on the brains. This closed topic. Then you need to sell something. Exactly. Let's push your winter tires or old prefix. Here Mr. Coleman was stunned. I actually meant something of yours to sell, not mine. He was indignant. So it's you who needs the money. Actually, you need them. UIO. Or do you think that tomorrow they will magically appear from somewhere? This is already my problem. With the author's help, I'll come up with know-how to solve them. Cold, let's not fight. Need to think what to do. We can tell Lena the truth and give her phone back, hopelessly suggested Mr. Coleman. Excellent idea. Take a gift from a woman, given to her for her birthday. After all, she is my wife, after all, Mr. Coleman. That yes, my wife could take money without asking? So you allowed. If you didn't let, I myself would not climb into her stash. So you put pressure on my brain, a lot, urgent need, help out, brother and all. Listen, another, well, what are you and I going to swear for the women? Lion insisted. Then it dawned on Mr. Coleman. All that, what Mrs. Coleman once said about his friend, was pure truth. He only cares about, to make him feel good, not everyone else. To him spit, he is ready to step over friends or even relatives without a share of shame. Now he arched his back, that a friend proceeded through it. Don't see me Mrs. Coleman today, he thought to himself. Leo just said, cold, I will wait until tomorrow, but in the evening I wait for a debt. They were just driving up to his house. Mr. Coleman dropped a friend, and he went home. On the threshold he was met by a pensive wife. Mr. Coleman looked at his wife and could not imagine how to confess what he did. This, after all, in fact, was theft, if not rattling. How could he fall for Leo's persuasion? Now he couldn't think of any logical excuse, but still needed to be told. Darling, here's the thing. I know. Husband was surprised and looked her straight in the eyes. You still climbed into his box? Alina came earlier, he asked with shame. I found out yesterday. Lena gave a debt yesterday, dry stated Mrs. Coleman. Why didn't you say anything? Hotels look, how do you get out and can you? Well? Leo kept his word? He promised to give everything. And what, a bag of money will fall on him tomorrow out of nowhere? Wife asked sarcastically. Mr. Coleman took a deep breath. He understood what she was getting at. It is unlikely. Sorry, I'm so guilty. You were right, and apparently I really don't understand people. How I didn't notice it before. Who is lucky that they ride? And you always followed his lead. You forgive me insecurely, I still want my money back. How to do it, I have one creative idea, but you won't like it, said Mrs. Coleman with a suspicious smile. Mrs. Coleman told her husband in detail what is their plan of action. An idea he didn't like the truth, but he saw no other choice. If he gives money tomorrow, then everything is canceled. In the morning they woke up, as usual, taking turns taking showers. Mrs. Coleman put herself in a festive look. I did my hair and made up a little brighter than usual. I put on nice dress, which I recently bought, but never walked. They got into the car and went to Lena's birthday party. Not getting away from home, how the call came from Leo, Buddy, are you going already? Yes, I just left. About, cool. Then go to the store. We agreed last year, without gifts, so Lena said, what will you drink there? Take with you. What? He asked Lena, who was shouting something from the kitchen. And Lena still asked to take it for Godfathers, and then she forgot, I'll give the money, when will you arrive? Mr. Coleman spoke to him on the speakerphone and Lena heard everything, only I don't understand the joke, why do we have to buy alcohol ourselves? I remember, it wasn't like this on your birthday. Or am I wrong? Certainly the same, did not have. I bought everything myself and put it in the refrigerator in advance, to get cold. Cool. However, despite internal conflict, the couple went to the store and bought everything they needed, and when they came to friends, everyone was already sitting at the table. Why are you so long? We already did not wait for you. Sit down, fill plates and glasses, let's celebrate. Mrs. Coleman approached Lena, who was already in full denomination Olivier, kissed her on the cheek and wished her a happy birthday. Mr. Coleman took this time to the left to the kitchen, ostensibly to open wine. Well, do you have money? He asked calmly. Mr. Coleman, tomorrow will definitely be. Let's not spoil Lena's holiday today. After all, she has a birthday after all, and then we will deal with this issue. Mr. Coleman didn't say anything, just went out into the living room for a second and winked at Genya. She smiled. It's time to put their plan into action. Len, where is the gift? Who did you admire so much? The birthday girl smiled and said, One, lie on the dresser. I haven't even unpacked it yet. There was no time, so much to do, you understand. Can look. Mrs. Coleman went to the chest of drawers and saw a box with exactly the same phone, how she wanted. Except for 64 gigabytes, and not at 128. Well, can I have a little less memory, NIS trouble, she thought. Len, and do you know, what did your Lyova borrow from Mr. Coleman for you as a gift? Unceremoniously asked Mrs. Coleman in front of all the guests. Lena even turned in surprise. That was the news. No, I didn't know. The thing is that he had to repay the debt today, but did not return. That's why I'm really sorry. But, we see, it's my birthday again, she said and put the box in her bag. Mr. Coleman deliberately distracted all this time to the left in the kitchen, until the wife screamed loudly, Mr. Coleman, we are leaving. I won't forget the package. Nobody did not dare to stand up and stop them, although the parents were sitting at the table, birthday girls and godfathers. Somebody just looked at Lena with sympathy, while others looked with hatred at Mrs. Coleman. Mr. Coleman came right away, as his wife called him. They quickly dressed and left this celebration of life. Yes, Mrs. Coleman was a little ashamed what had to be done, but it was Lyova who was to blame for everything, and her husband, certainly, with otherwise, believed the man who had basically no faith. Spouses came home and decided to arrange their own little holiday. Mr. Coleman chuckled and said, I didn't even think that you really do it. Live like wolves, to be like a wolf. I know that you have been friends with him for a long time. Perhaps, too long. Do you regret your friendship with Lena? Yeah, we've never really been friends. She was just a good friend and wife of my husband's friend. This does not mean girlfriend. Then we are fine. Are you no longer angry? Mrs. Coleman carefully looked at her husband. Are you ashamed of what you did? She asked. Very ashamed. My conscience still gnaws, husband confessed. Then promise me that you will never do this to me again in your life, Mrs. Coleman said sternly. I swear your new phone, he joked, and then he said more seriously, I promise, never ever. After this story, Mr. Coleman ended his friendship with Left and cut off all contact with him. By 6 months he learned from mutual friends that Lena kicked her husband out of the house. We see, she got tired of putting up with him, and she finally understood what would be easier without him than with him.